The only reason we're saying this is to say you're not behind. You're not behind. Whatever you're doing, if you're doing anything, is more than most people. And even if you're just interested in this, you're not behind. So many of the people that are trying to say you're behind are trying to sell you something.
Absolutely. And you and I consume so much content, and we're constantly sort of studying this AI space. We're looking at how it's moving every day. And I also think that the goal here is to distill some of that information for an audience so that they can get what we think are the most important things that are currently going on in the AI space that's relevant for a business owner.
Yeah. And something that, when we say build different and when we think about why this podcast has some reason to exist amongst the many others that are obviously out there, is that everyone is talking about AI right now. There's a lot of fear of missing out. There's a lot of FOMO about AI. And, sometimes I get on the phone with a new prospect or with a new client and I ask them, why are we talking right now? And literally they say, because I'm afraid of being left behind. We're not here to do that. We're not here to try to push pressure that you need to get started with this stuff or even, to talk about getting left behind in that language. And honestly, we're not even here to talk only about AI because Bones and I share something similar in our approach is that when you're looking at AI, this is really about the operations of your company and how it functions. And AI is one way that you can help make your company function better, but it's part of a really broad tool set. And we want to help kind of show that when you're looking at implementing AI, there's so many other pieces to that conversation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's business first, operations first, tools second.
Yes.
And the way that we look at it is, medicine before diagnosis is malpractice, right? We want to make sure that
Yeah.
when we're prescribing solutions for you, it's rooted in true business outcomes first. So, overall, when you're thinking about AI, when we're thinking about this podcast and what it can deliver, we are really trying to help a business owner figure out which of these solutions will fit solving their specific business problem and their specific business case. So we always sort of use the analogy that if you were to double the size of your business, what would break? What department would break? What area of your business would fall apart? And that's where we really want to focus on that constraint and focus on putting AI solutions there first. And then once you get started, once you see some value, once you see the return, once you start to see some traction, then we can move it into those other areas.
Exactly. And, I think the thing kind of to finish up the introductory portion of this podcast today, the thing that we really want to shy away from on this podcast is tools. Which tools should I use? This is not a podcast where we're going to suggest to you whether you should choose Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini or Microsoft Copilot. That is a great question, and there's certainly a time and a place to ask that question. And when I run workshops teaching folks in various industries about AI, those are some of the first questions I usually get: is we're using ChatGPT today, should we switch to Claude, etc. This podcast is not about that because we pay a lot of attention to this stuff, and the changes going on are so rapid, and the concepts that we're interested in and the concepts that we're teaching, they really apply on any tool that you're using. And so when Bones says business first, that's actually what we mean. This is about the functioning of your business. This is about the best outcomes that you can get from the technology. And those are, at this day and age, going to be the same, whichever tool you're using.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
They are, Anthropic, OpenAI, they're head to head. Grok is now in the game with XAI solutions. So these things are constantly changing. So what we love and what I think when I hear build different, we also want to help you integrate AI solutions that are agnostic that work across any of these platforms, right? Because we're starting with business first, we're not tied into any specific tool ecosystem. You can use whichever solution you have in place that you're the most comfortable with right now.
For sure.
Yep.
So, essentially that's kind of where that's where we're coming to this podcast from. We're coming to this podcast from those particular places, staying away from the tools, doing our best to stay away from the hype. This is of course a hype filled time in the world, and there's only so much that we can do that, but we're going to be less like that than your other podcasts. I actually think that could be an interesting thing to focus on, Bones, a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
Is like,
Um, I think about
even
that.
in your business or in anyone's business, right? Like,
Sure.
what does this look like?
Yeah, I think about that a lot because there's this concept that I have around personal AI and your personal use of AI and how that personal use can sort of evolve into an organizational use of AI, right? So the way that you use AI as a person, whether your chat GPT chat conversations is different than AI as a system that's integrated into an overall organizational standpoint where people need to be able to share context, they need to be able to share information. So I like thinking about it from a personal AI, someone creating AI solutions for themselves to accelerate and do the force multiplier on an individual basis versus AI as an organizational force multiplier where the entire company can move forward because they have a single integrated AI system. And
Yeah.
always, the rule of thumb is AI is only as powerful as the context that you give it. So the more context it has, the more relevant context, it's going to be more powerful.
And I'll give another example of context that I've been working with a lot lately.
Hmm.
I do a lot of research to get ready for presentations. I work a lot in the architecture, engineering, and construction space.
Hmm.
And I there's something that I have to do a lot. I have to research what is new in the industry right now and how does it apply in the way that I teach for the types of solutions that my company designs.
Hmm.
And what I started out doing a year ago for that was to open up a chat in one of ChatGPT or Claude, and I would go explain every time. Hey, here's my company. Here's what I do. Here's what I did last week. Here's what I'm working on this week. And then I would have to tell it, go look at these 10 websites and then go do some research. Um, what I do now in the system that I use, which is built on top of a few of the different models, it works a lot with Codex from OpenAI. But that system has access to every proposal I've ever sent, to every recording of every meeting and every workshop that I've led. And it has
Mm.
a list of sources that I do research from. And so now I just open up that chat and I say, prepare me a presentation for this week. And I get exactly what I need because it has the way that I teach, the sources that are important to me, the questions that the people who attend my workshops have asked in the past. And, you know, I'm just one person. When you take
Right.
that concept and apply it to your business, if you have 10 people doing research in your business, right? When I go back to what do people misunderstand about AI, it's that mostly that people need to open up a chat and work in this way that we were all introduced to ChatGPT to, 3, 4 years ago, right? What we want to do now is take something that people would have to do manually in a chat, have the one person who knows how to do that process best actually create the skills that allow that to work, and now your entire team can just say, "Get me ready for this week."
Yeah, absolutely. So, what I also heard you say, it is really about workflows, right?
Yes,
And it's about defining those workflows and
yes,
setting up the workflows within an AI system where now one person's knowledge can be shared across an entire team. And the AI has that same context across the entire team instead of just one
exactly.
person's unique chat. And I guess where I started using that many years ago was with ChatGPT projects.
Yeah.
You could add a project, you could add some documents, or you could add some Excel files or PDFs. And then you could have some really great context and some really great examples. But the real unlock for me was the ability to share that with someone else. So
Yes.
that sort of started this whole process of everyone creating GPTs, right? Hey,
Yes.
use my GPT. It's been trained on my specific knowledge, and I think now we're
Yeah.
starting to see that even evolve even further now
But tell
with
me this,
agents.
Bones. I mean, tell me this. You are running a company that does a lot of discovery with businesses in a lot of different industries, pretty mature businesses for the most part.
Hmm. Yep.
How many of those people are mostly just have some employees using ChatGPT? How many of those people have agents? Like what do you really think? Like, I know for anyone who's on LinkedIn right now, in whatever your industry is, you're seeing
Hmm.
people posting on LinkedIn that they're automating everyone's jobs and just comment here and get the workflow that your industry needs to 10x their business. Like, how many businesses are really doing that right now versus just barely getting into ChatGPT? Do you think?
I would say maybe 15% of the businesses that we consult with have something beyond just a chat interface. I think now we're starting to see more and more people using tools like Copilot or using Codex, where they have access to the local computers. But really, there's still a large group of people that still sort of live in that chat world, right? Where the AI is not doing work, the AI is providing knowledge, sort of advice, and a collaborative sort of chat system, right? I'm not
Yeah,
seeing, very many automated agents that are creating presentations in an automatic way, or creating documents, or using design standards, or using templates for the way that they work. I'm not seeing that as much currently.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean, before you jump in, I think it's the only reason we're saying this is to say you're not behind. You're not
Exactly.
behind. Whatever you're doing, if you're doing anything, is more than most people. And even if you're just interested in this, you're not behind.
That's right.
It's,
That's right.
so many of the people that are trying to say you're behind are trying to sell you something. And
Right. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I mean, I think that, even for guys like you and I, that we use this technology every day, and we'll go on the sort of social media world, and we almost feel like we're behind, and we're
yeah,
using this technology every day. So I think
yeah,
that for the average business owner, or just someone that wants to be able to integrate AI more and more into their environment, we're just recommending that you really go back to the business case. We really go back to what are the things that you do on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I think I read something. There's a new feature in either Codex or ChatGPT where it can look at everything you did
it's
in
Codex.
Codex, and it's
It's
Codex
Codex
has this
from
feature.
OpenAI.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's Codex from OpenAI. It can look at how you use the AI system. It can then give you recommendations for what to generate skills and automations and workflows based on the kinds of things that you're doing within the
ex-
system. So,
exactly. And I think actually that is a really good kind of place that we could take kind of this conversation before we move on
sure,
to another section. But I think,
sure.
you know, if we want to talk about for folks who are listening here that feel like maybe they're a little bit more behind, or, in my survey that I asked, the most common question, like I asked people, what is preventing you from going into this stuff in more depth with, AI, automation, sort of like streamlining their businesses in a more modern way. And the options that I had listed were like cost, risk, a couple other things. And then one of the options I had listed was we don't know where to start. And basically everyone chose that one. Now, everyone
Hmm.
has liability risks. And I had another question about liability and whether people were worried about risk, which they should be.
Hmm.
And everyone said then, okay, yes, we do have concern about risk. But when
Hmm.
I said, what's preventing you from starting? It was not risk. it was, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start.
Right.
And I think something that we can talk about and something that both Bones and I are kind of obsessed with is, the place you start is in a very easy way. Just start to figure out, what do you do every day and what does it look like? And, I find when I go into these businesses, they might say, hey, we have this one thing. Like I'm working with a business right now. They're smaller, they're about 10 people. But everyone in the business spends 1 or 2 hours of every week doing a process which could be done in about 5 minutes with AI. And so the first thing that they wanted help from my firm in fixing was, can we automate this process? It's a report generation process.
Hmm.
And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I said, great, can you show me how, show me the step by step of how is this process done? And that didn't
Mm.
exist. So 10 people doing the same thing. So we're talking about, a fair amount of hours on payroll every week
Sure.
being
Sure.
spent on this process. And no one had ever written down how it was done.
Sure. Yeah.
So
And
what we had to do before we could automate it is literally write down step one, step two, step three, step four.
that's right. Yeah, we call it the happy path. If all things were the same, what is the ideal state of that process, and how do we make sure that that process happens the same way? And I had a very similar conversation with a customer that we just did an audit process for, and they said, "Oh, this process we can't write it down as a process. It's too complicated. There's too many edge cases." And what we realized is, if you just focus on the happy path,
Yeah.
the path of least resistance, where there are no weird edge cases, that's where you start. You just build that. You have a conversation, whether you want to dictate to AI, or just sort of write it down and then just send it into the AI model. It will create that workflow step by step for you. And then what's really great is, for the edge cases, say, hey, bring all the edge cases to me. So anything that doesn't follow the happy path, bring those edge cases to you to handle manually. And then what you'll realize is, those edge cases are ones that you can now program back in to the
Yeah.
process, right?
Yeah.
You create a new
So,
fork in the road.
and so the real takeaway here, right? So, Bones and I are both working with established businesses, making real money, paying real payroll, where very important things are not being written down. And the way to
Hmm.
fix them is not write a technical manual that's 100 pages before you start working. The way to fix them is open up Loom, open up a Zoom meeting with yourself, open up the transcription tool on your phone, whatever, and say, now I'm going to open this window. Now I'm going to log in here. Now I'm going to do this. Now I'm going to combine these three things. Um, really sloppy, really messy. Like the faster and the quicker, the better. Because you're shooting for 80% here. You're not shooting for 100%. And once you
Hmm.
have that 80%, someone on your team can start working on it. A consultant can start helping you. Chat GPT, Claude, whatever tool you happen to already have, you can feed that transcription to that tool and say, help me make this better.
Right. Absolutely. That's a
And
that's a great advice. I think that sort of lowers the fear bar, so people can just get started.
what is one practical use of AI that deserves more attention than it's getting right now?
I think what I am seeing are CEOs that are feeling overwhelmed. They've got too many emails, they've got too many meetings and all sorts of things to keep track of. I'm seeing operations leaders that are trying to juggle lots of different projects and various things. I think the personal knowledge management system is vastly underrated and extremely powerful to help someone, take this chaos and sort of build some kind of order and
Yeah,
organizational, strategy around it. And
I love
just to
that.
kind of define what that means is, this is very personal AI. This is you helping you to sort of organize the chaos that's around you.
It's so important. And, where I would kind of go like right along with that, and even simpler than that, is the starting point to get there is something that I've been calling with my clients lately, just capture in general. And so, like, what
Mhm.
I find is, anyone who's using Zoom is probably getting the auto transcribed notes from their Zoom meetings. But what we do find is a lot of people who work in corporate, their company uses Teams. So then there's some things that are in Teams, there's some things that are in Zoom. Sometimes their client invites them to a Google Meet. So now I've got all these transcription notes that are maybe sitting in my email. I forgot to record some of it. And then some of our important meetings happen in the conference room. But in the conference room, even if we have a system for external meetings, no one thinks to turn it on and record the internal meeting. So now the internal meeting wasn't recorded. And then, for folks like I do a lot of work for companies who work in the field, construction,
Mhm.
architecture. No one's
Mhm.
recording the conversations that are happening on the job sites. They're writing everything down manually when they're on the job site. So all of a sudden, I have all these conversations and all this information. I was just got off a call before this. They were like, "Oh, one of our clients insists on talking to us on WhatsApp." So the entire client
Right.
history for that client is on WhatsApp, right?
Right.
So when I talk about capture, it's how do I make a practice that everything which is not like, unable to be recorded for security reasons is all captured and goes into a central place so we can then do what Bones is saying and actually do something with that information. Because usually when I ask people, do you record your meetings? They say yes, only some of them, and I don't do anything with the transcripts unless I happen to need something from them and I open them.
Right.
And
Right.
so capture first. How can I get 80, 90% of the stuff that's happening, the important work conversations, to be captured and recorded properly and
Mhm.
stored somewhere centrally? And then we can move on to how do I process those so that if it's meeting minutes that need to come out in a certain
Mhm.
format, if it's decisions that need to go in my knowledge base,
Right.
whatever it is, right? Then I can
Yeah.
move into doing something with that
Yeah.
information. So,
Absolutely. And that's our most popular workshop right now. The workshop where we're helping people build these personal knowledge management systems, because once you get the personal AI puzzle solved, you really start to have a thought partner, a collaborative partner that you've built that has your context. So you can use that to level up your business with a
yeah,
business use for AI. So I really think that mastery of the personal knowledge management is key. Um, Using the context from meetings and calendar invites and emails, and making that available to collaborate with and to generate ideas from. Yeah,
um,
yeah,
so that's us. Our first little
yeah.
exploration into building different. We expect this to grow and evolve, but we appreciate you coming along for the ride.